Yeah. So, what did you think of the news of Jeff Beck's passing yesterday?
Well, it's obviously a very sad news. I mean, the guy was an icon of the world.
Yeah.
He was a pioneer and a groundbreaker. He was there with
I mean, he goes all back to way
Page
to
and the Yardbirds back in the day.
Yardbirds and Rod Stewart and the Faces, before that. And, what I was even aware of course, you remind me of that great Beck, Bogart, and Appice album. And it was just, they just did that one great album. But, I tell you, all these years later, I was listening to last night, prepping, talking to you today. And I was reminded what a great album that is. And, I wasn't really aware of, Superstitious, of course, is a Stevie Wonder song. But I had no idea that Jeff Beck had played on the original version with Stevie Wonder.
Well, Stevie wrote Superstition for Jeff Beck. And then the management went, no, you're going to record it first. And I remember reading this in Circus Magazine when it first happened.
Wow.
I was on a bus going out to visit my mother on Long Island. And I just happened to, and I was reading that article. I remember that Jeff Beck was pissed off about it. And then, I guess Stevie gave him another song to say he was, sorry about it. And Jeff Beck did that. But then eventually Jeff Beck went back and did his own version of Superstition anyway.
Yeah, I think they both did all right, career-wise. And Jeff Beck, of course, had a huge, solo career, and he's done all these other great projects. And, speaking of Superstitious, I remember, a number of years ago, probably in the early 90s, hearing Richie Kotzen do a version of that on one of his solo albums.
Yeah. I really didn't listen to Beck, though, that much. Like I said, I was a big fan of Cactus. So there's that.
Talk about that, how you first got into Cactus.
What's that?
Tell the story how you first got into Cactus and became a fan of their music.
Yeah. Well, Cactus was like the American Led Zeppelin before there was Led Zeppelin. And I think Carmine, I remember Carmine saying something about that they first brought Zeppelin over to America. And I don't remember if it was Vanilla Fudge or Cactus, but one of the two bands, they brought Zeppelin over on Zeppelin's first tour, and Zeppelin opened for them. So Carmine and Bonham automatically, became good friends and were talking shop about everything. But, Beck was supposed to be part of Cactus, but he was in an vehicle accident. So he wasn't ready. So they had to take Jim McCarty instead. But, I remember also reading that the reasons Cactus broke up were the same reasons that they got together for the differences of what they brought to the table. And then, Tim Bogarts was an amazing bassist, but he was busy, and I get in his playing style, and nothing wrong with that, but it depends, I guess, on who's writing the material and who's going to put what in what spot and where, and like that. And I guess the problem came down to wanting the songs to be simpler or have a simpler rhythm section or something. So what brought them together actually broke them apart.
Yeah. And talking about Vanilla Fudge for a minute, I know the last thing they'd done, but I'd interviewed Carmine a piece about this a couple of years back. The very last thing Vanilla Fudge did with Tim Bogart is they recorded this really kind of rocked up version of the Supremes' Stop in the Name of Love. People can go on YouTube and check that out. But that's the last thing Tim Bogart ever did. What a way to go out,
I didn't hear that version. The only version, a rocked up version I heard of Stop in the Name of Love was by Tallis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Billy Sheehan's, band Tallis. Yeah. On their first album, they cover that, and they do an excellent version of it as well.
Yeah.
But that's the only other rocked up version I heard.
I urge you, Rick, to go check that out later on YouTube, because again, I interviewed Carmine about that, and he was telling me that they just put it out as a single. They actually recorded a few years before Tim got sick with the cancer, but that's the very last thing they put out with him. So that's kind of that's kind of a cool thing for people to check out.
Yeah.
And talking about John Bonham for a minute. When everybody thinks of great drummers, Carmine Appice is always right up there at the top. But I talked to Carmine. He was actually telling me stories kind of like what you said. He says, about taking Led Zeppelin like on their first tours. And he says, can you believe that's kind of how old I am, that I'm one of the guys that actually influenced John Bonham. And in a similar situation, I interviewed Mark Stein, the keyboard player, and from Vanilla Fudge, and he was telling me, that they toured very early on with Deep Purple, and John Lord was telling Mark Stein of all people how what a big influence Mark Stein was on John Lord. Of course, of the legendary Deep Purple. Can you imagine that? I mean, that's how far back Vanilla Fudge goes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I recently was listening to again when my parents broke up. The guy that my mother wound up going out with and eventually marrying, her second husband, John Knox, he and his partner Dean, out on Long Island, they managed two rock clubs. There was a lot of college kids,
Yeah.
and they managed two rock bands, Liquid Smoke and The Unspoken Word. And Liquid Smoke, I was just listening to them again the other day. They sound just like Vanilla Fudge.
Wow.
I mean, the same type of the Hammond keyboards, the same emotional emoting in the songs. It's a blues-based, acid rock type band, and I just couldn't get over how much they sound. It was there's a song on there called let's see, what is it? Hang on, I got it right here.
Okay.
It's. I'll share them with you.
Sure. Yeah.
This is the Liquid Smoke.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you can see there's a little glare on there.
Yeah, it's showing up. We can see it. Yeah.
There we are.
Wow.
Shelter of Your Arms. If you listen to Shelter of Your Arms and think Vanilla Fudge, you just say it sounds just like Vanilla Fudge.
Yeah.
And I'm sure since Carmine was doing his thing, starting out on the Long Island circuit back then as well, he probably knows who these guys are.
Yeah.
Because if there's another band that sounds like you, there's like a competition thing.
Yeah.
So he probably knows who they are. I mentioned that in Facebook the other day, but he didn't respond to it. They're also the first band I ever heard who did the cut "I Who Have Nothing," which Tom Jones did. It was a lot of people cut that song. These guys were doing this is like 1969.
Oh wow, yeah, right around the same time. Wow.
Yeah, they also did "Hard to Handle" decades before the Black Crowes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's on here. It's a Man's World. That's a James Brown song. Or "Hard to Handle" is an Otis Redding song. Okay. And then the other band was The Unspoken Word.
Oh wow.
Okay. There we go.
There you go.
And there's a female singer on here named Dee Dee Puma. This woman's voice can rival, if I don't want to insult anybody, but she's like right up there with Janis Joplin.
Oh wow.
She has got grit and power. You could also compare her to Genya Ravan from 10 Wheel Drive. Again, that's back in my era in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Both, bands, blues rock, they got that acid fuzz tone in the guitar, which was cutting edge back then.
Yeah.
Like Leslie West, that kind of a feel to it. They both bands put out one album, I think, and that was it. But that was an introduction to what my, the world of music that my mother was related to. It's kind of like We're at 6 Degrees of Separation stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
She had these albums around the house, and her kids, I guess my stepbrothers and stepsister, were like raving about these bands, and they knew them. The kids knew them personally. They would sometimes go to the club and before the club opened, and they'd see them, hang out and talk to them and whatnot.
Let me ask you, Rick. I don't know if I've ever asked you this. So, if any of your other family members grown up into playing instruments like you, or were you the only one that got really into that?
No, not really playing instruments. When my dad had gotten out of the Navy, out of the Korean War, he used his GI Bill to put himself through broadcasting school, because he loved big bands and swing and Frank Sinatra and all of that, and jazz and all. And so he was at CBS at the school there in New York. And he says, right before they were set to graduate, he goes, there's a knock on the door. The teacher opens the door. Some guy comes in. He goes, who wants to start now?
Wow.
Like right now. My father was like,
me.
The first guy put his hand up. He goes, follow me. And he took him through whatever courses he was supposed to learn. And he started out on WGBB FM, which is in Freeport, Long Island. And my dad wound up putting together his own show, his own jazz big band swing show. And I have copies of the letters from the record labels thanking him for having the artists on the air, and he's interviewing them. There's a couple of pictures of him sitting there at the turntable with whatever the artist was, and he's he's holding up the album, and he's talking about the the music and whatnot. And I think I was like 3 or 4. It's a vague memory, but I remember him taking me there on his day off one day. It was like a Saturday or something.
Yeah.
And I remember the walls were painted that weird industrial green color, like you see in institutions. It's not dark green, it's not light green. It's like this weird color in between. And I remember the glass window for the booth where the engineer would sit. I saw the engineer board. And my dad was just going through some stuff. I guess he was preparing for when he would come in on his day on, to do his show. And then we walked down the street. Went to they don't have these anymore. We went to an ice cream parlor, and we had chocolate egg creams. Oh, wow. But if you're from New York, you know what those are.
Yeah.
And so, but he told me his engineer was George Savalas.
Okay.
Now the Savalas name, some people they go, yeah, it sounds familiar. George Savalas' brother was Telly Savalas, the actor.
Oh wow. Okay. Wow.
The TV show Kojak. Remember? Yeah, that he was also in like the Dirty Dozen. He played like a loony soldier in the Dirty Dozen. But my dad also said that Telly would sometimes come in and assist his brother George engineer my dad's radio show.
Oh, how cool is that? Wow.
How cool. Well, it gets even cooler. My dad, this is like before he passed away, he told me Telly Savalas is Jennifer Aniston's godfather.
Oh, wow.
Think about 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, wow.
I would love an opportunity to meet Jennifer Aniston and tell her that. Just watch her reaction.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. And being that your dad was into swing music, do you think that had played any bit of a role in you really getting into the bass? Because, a lot of that swing music's heavy on the bass.
Well, no, as I said, he didn't play any instruments.
No, but I mean, you hear the music and maybe you kind of, that bass, that's really heavier. That's.
Yeah. What happened with me was one time I was out visiting my mother. She lived on Long Island. When they split up, I went up growing up in Brooklyn. I was with my dad. Okay. So there would be visitations like that going on. Yeah. And then I was out visiting her one time when she was still living in Long Beach, Long Island. I don't even think that house is there anymore because there was like this superstorm years ago that like wiped out half of Long Island.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. I think it destroyed that block of that where her house was. But her husband, John, they noticed this fascination I had for bass guitar. Mm-hmm. And I would talk about it all the time. I'd seen Steppenwolf on TV.
Yeah.
And I saw Nick St. Nicholas in his leather pants and his buckskin fringe jacket and kind of like, grooving along playing. I went, that's cool. That's what I want to do. I want to be like that guy. I want to be a bass player.
Yeah.
So John took me over to, there's a chain of music stores called Sam Ash.
Yeah. They're still around today. Yeah.
And they still have a store, I think, out on Hempstead, Long Island. John took me in the store. And he says to the guy behind the counter, he's a budding bassist. He wants to start out. What can we do for him? And I looked up on the very top shelf. They had a bunch of guitars all set up on stands up there. And I looked and I saw a Rickenbacker, just like what Nick St. Nicholas was playing.
Oh wow. And
I said that one right there. That's the one I want.
Yeah.
And John goes, well, how much is it to the guy behind the counter? And he says, well, that's a little out of my budget right now. Because I don't know what Rickenbackers were going for in 1968 or 69. Probably a lot more affordable than they are now.
I bet. Yeah.
He says, well, he's just starting out. Let's see what else can you find him something else. He's just beginning. Then he looked around the store and he found, I think it was a Kent bass.
Wow.
I don't know, maybe like $100 to $200 or something. He got it for, and it had black vinyl wound around the strings. I'd never seen anything like that before. I didn't know my ass or my elbow about bass, about any guitars. Yeah. I didn't know notes. I didn't know chords. I didn't know anything about it. I had to obviously learn at some point, but they gave me something to take home and plunk around on.
So would you say you're self-taught, or did you take lessons? Did somebody teach you, or?
No. Well, when I got back to Brooklyn with the bass, my dad's like, well, you can't. It's a bass without an amp is like a bullet without a gun. you can't have one without it. So we went up to the main avenue there, and we went to Radio Shack, and he bought me a little amp, you know, with the one little speaker in it like that, and the cord and all that. And I would sit down in the basement and try and play and figure out stuff. And then there's my grandmother banging on the floor, or to me, the ceiling. She's going, you know, boom, 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 boom. Stop, turn it down, turn it. That's all I kept hearing was turn it down. It's too loud. Because this is a bass. It's just thump, 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 you know. So I would put on my records and try and, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm floundering. I'm trying to play along and figure out what is, okay, they're in this part. So I try to find that sound. It sounds like on the neck where that note would be to, and I little by little try to figure out my way around the neck based on what I'm hearing, trying to follow. And I don't know, I was only 13, 14 at the time.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't really have any formal lessons, and I was never given any, you know, I guess they couldn't afford to send me to a little, you know, like a little music store or something to teach me how to play guitar or whatever. You know, the big thing back then when you're in parochial school is piano. Everybody wanted you to learn how to play piano, you know, and the nuns would teach the nuns would teach the girls after school how to play piano. And I'm like, it looked too complicated to me. So I was just hitting and missing and trying to guess what I was doing until I got to the Martian Rock Band in '75 when I got out of high school.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, and the guitar player, Sebastian, was patient enough to show me what goes where and how it goes and this, that, and the other. And the songs in the Martian Rock Band were really easy, really elementary by today's standards. You know, it's like punk meets space spunk music. I don't know.
Let me ask you, Rik, do you have any like old recordings from or demos from that band?
No, I wish we did. And I brought that up to Sebi, and I said, I wish we had recorded some of the Martian Rock Band songs. He goes, they're all up here.
Yeah.
He goes, I have them in my head. I said, well, they're not doing us any good up there. And he goes, well, if you ever want to get together and record at some point.
Yeah.
I said, oh, no. Well, now I have access to a recording studio here in Missouri, about 20 minutes, half an hour away from me. Yeah. I got to figure out and see if there's any way we can do this, you know, even if it's like through files.
Is everybody still alive from the band?
Well, the guitar player is, he goes by the name Sebastian Black now. He's a psychic medium magician in New York.
Yeah.
And he's got like a full-on Addams Family goth type house.
Wow.
You know,
wow.
His wife's like Morticia. He's like the whole dress in black. I mean, it's like we're all the way, all 9 yards with the whole, you know, that kind of imagery. So it's just pretty cool.
And let me ask you about the Martian Rock Band, because you told me before that you guys were really like, you know, deep into costumes, and you really had you know, an interesting look. And I know that early on you were kind of close to some of the Kiss guys early on, like that, going back to 1972, especially Peter Criss, who you'd been friends with or dated his sister, I believe. Did any of that have an influence on you wanting to, when you had a band, to kind of do something a little more than just being your typical band in jeans and t-shirts?
I'm sorry, you got a screen glitch there. Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I was saying the Martian Rock Band, you told me before that, you know, you guys really had a great image, a great look. I was wondering if that was at all influenced by, you knowing the guys in Kiss early on and kind of seeing what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you know, when the first opening song for the Martian Rock Band, how cliche is this? It was called "Take Me to Your Leader," which is, you know, the little green man thing. Take me to your leader.
Yeah.
And in the song, we're playing a section, and we stop, and he goes, the drummer, he's from whatever part of the universe. You know?
Yeah.
And then we stop, and he goes, and the bass player, he's from Mercury. So now I'm cornered into being from Mercury. It was a 3-syllable planetary word. It just happened to fit there. I guess he didn't have any other planet, and I didn't question it. So I figured, okay, Mercury. And then he's supposed to be the greatest magician in the galaxy, which was another one of our songs.
Okay.
So I went home, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what could I be if I'm from Mercury? Mm-hmm. Well, I know that the American Southwest has lizards.
Okay. Yeah.
We do have some lizards that are amphibious, but they're not around water.
Yeah.
And my favorite universal monster was the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So what I wanted to try and do was blend a reptilian before the extraterrestrial reptilian thing became a thing like it is now. Reptoids, reptilians, and I created a reptilian persona.
Wow. Yeah.
And I found this I went to like the makeup stores and I found this. It's a cream eyeshadow, and you know you put it up over your eyelids. It's a sparkly green eyeshadow. So I had a black spandex bodysuit from Capezio. Capezio had a huge store in New York because it was a big ballet clientele for all the Broadway shows and ballet. So Capezio had this big store, and you can get spandex bodysuits in like almost any color. So I got a black spandex bodysuit, and I turned it on backwards so the zipper would open in the front, like that. And so whatever skin was exposed, I colored it with that green, makeup all the way up to my neck, whatever was exposed. And then I did my face. And I'm sitting at home in front of this little vanity that I had with a little mirror. I'm down in the basement, experimenting with this stuff. And I know that Ace Frehley was a spaceman and Gene Simmons was a lizard or, something like that.
Yeah, his was based, I know, off of, he was a fan of those horror movies too.
Yeah. So I kind of blended the two and did like an Ace Frehley lizard, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I did myself green, and I took a black eyeliner pencil, and upside down I drew all these scales, working my chest. So I had scales, and then when I got to my face, I covered my eyebrows with derma wax, and redrew them up like Spock.
Wow!
And over my eyes, I used blue shadow, and I covered up there. And then in my mouth, I put 1 or 2 drops of green food coloring. So when I open my mouth, I go like Gene with the tongue.
Yeah.
It was all green.
Now let me ask, I imagine you guys, please tell me you took some photos at least, did you?
Yeah, I do. I do have the photos. And then that's when I learned about streaking tips, which was that it's like a silver or any color spray you put in your hair. You can make highlights. So I did a silver stripe in my hair, and people looking at it now, they go, "Oh, you look like Ziggy Stardust." It was very Bowie looking, that. And then Sebi had in stage magic. They call everything a gag. Even in the film industry, they call it a gag. So he had this gag where he had a Gibson Flying V guitar, and he built 4 extra wings. So you have this V.
Wow.
And then you have, how do I do this? Like an extra wing here, an extra wing here, an extra wing here, and an extra wing here. So he had all of these extra wings, and it was all painted silver because that was the cool space color. We were adapting a lot of things off of the old Republic serials, the cliffhangers, Commander Cody, the Purple Monster, Day the Earth Stood Still with Michael Rennie and Gort, like that. And we had pictures of this stuff up behind us on the walls in our rehearsal loft. And that was the thing that brought Sebastian and I together really rapidly, was we both had this love for these science fiction movies. So at the end of his headstock, behind the tuning pegs, he had this little, looked like a nasal spray bottle. It was a little black bottle with a little tiny little straw on it. And he had it affixed up there. And in that bottle, he would take it off, and he put this powder in it. And for this powder, he would use a cigarette lighter, and he would squeeze the bottle from the back of the headstock with his thumb, and it would spray the powder out. And the powder would catch fire, and it was a gag called Dragon's Breath.
Oh, wow.
Now, all stage magicians know what this is.
Yeah.
Now, you could pour this powder on a table and throw a match on it, and it won't light. It will not ignite.
Amazing. Wow. You'd think it would.
The match goes out. It's the secret. The key to this is that it has to be aerated like a spray in order for it to be effective. So once you spray the powder in the air and hit it with a lighter, it'll ignite like a flamethrower.
Oh, wow.
So this is now decades before, like Nikki Sixx now shoots flames out of the end of his face. It's probably propane propelled or something. Or might have a hose running to it, a hose line. I don't know how he does the gag, but so Sebi used to blow fire at the end of his headstock, and I went,
Yeah, how's he
what
doing?
can I do to
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah,
you know, we were kind of like one-upping each other, but like in a
yeah, yeah,
friendly way.
yeah, yeah.
And so I had a pair of these silver lame ladies cocktail gloves. And what I did was I put a little hole in the tip of the index finger here, and I would secret the bottle underneath inside the glove at a certain point in our set.
Uh-huh.
And I had a cocktail straw that fit over the straw of the bottle perfectly and ran right up my finger. So
Wow.
the whole thing is confederated, like a confederate inside my glove. You wouldn't know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Now I need an ignition system to light that because I can't use the hand because it's got the bottle under the glove.
Yeah, yeah.
So Gene Simmons used to have candles on both sides, candelabras on both sides of his SVTs.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had a little thing built where I had a candle on the side of my amp. And the other ignition system you can use is something called flash paper. Now,
Wow.
magicians use this as they move their hand across, like across a stage or something,
Yeah,
and they would see this little ball of fire in their hand that would just disappear. It's like an onion skin paper, and it comes in a little pad. And
oh, wow.
there used to be all the magic stores in Times Square in New York City, and Sebi told me where the magic stores go. Go here. This is where I get my stuff at. So he helped kind of encourage me. He saw that I was taking an active participation in wanting to up the show.
Yeah.
We were trying to do stuff that nobody was doing back then. This is, like I said, 1975. So I would use the flash paper in one hand as my igniter, and I would go over to the candle. And as I lit the paper from the candle, sweeping my hand across that, now I had an open flame in the air.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't have to use a lighter just because I'm pulling the flame with my hand before it goes out. And then I would spread like Spider-Man. You know, he had the little Spidey, the web shooters in the palm of his hand.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same principle. Because I was a big Spider-Man fan. I was okay, how do I get the? So I would squeeze that bottle just enough to shoot enough powder up through the straw as I had a flame, and I would then go whoosh, and as this big ball of flame would come out of my fingers. So my finger was, in a sense, the flamethrower.
And how, we would get, how long did it take you to feel comfortable in your ability to get on stage and do it safely,
Well, that's what rehearsals for at the Loft. There's I think it's 250 West 30th Street.
Yeah.
It's still there in Manhattan. They had a lot of buildings with industrial lofts.
Yeah. Yeah.
In New York, for making clothing and textiles and, sewing machine centers, things like that.
Sure.
So there was this building that had all these lofts in it, and each floor had different bands in the different rooms, different lofts. They'd pay rent. So that's what we had. We had I guess it was maybe a 10 by 25, 10 by 30 foot room.
Wow.
With windows that would overlook the street.
Yeah.
And we had our amps and the drums set up in one end, and we just play lengthwise. You'd come in this way, and then we would be like that, the long way of the room. And we'd have parties there and stuff and whatnot. And but that's where we rehearsed and we practiced all this stuff, and like that.
Well, I mean, because you even hear a story about where very first Kiss show back in 1973, Gene Simmons catches his hair on fire, legendary story. I'd like to thank you, Rik, once again for doing this today. This was a lot of fun, and I think what was a little different is we had a little plan on what we were going to talk about, but we kind of just freeformed it, and I think this is a real fun way of doing it. So if you're happy with the way this came out today, we'll be doing more of these. So I definitely get in touch with you, and I'm going to do my best to post this by next week. So I'll let you know once it goes up. Thanks for doing this. It was a lot of fun. What do you think?
Well, I'm glad we finally got it off the ground. I had a couple of things real quick I wanted to plug. As we have the upcoming Rock and Pod convention in Nashville on the weekend of March 17th, 18th, and then Kill Fest 2. And it's 5 bands playing, and 2 of the bands that Ron is managing, and they're on his own record label now. And Stacey Blaze from LA Guns is in one of the bands, and then it's Keel, then the Ron Keel band and Steeler. So Mitch Perry and Dwayne Miller, respectively, on guitar and drums, and Ron and I, and we're going to be debuting some new material I'm not at liberty to reveal anything at this point. I'm sworn to secrecy. Watch Facebook and all the media on January 25th.
Okay, and I'll tell you what, Rick, down the line, I'd like to talk to you about kind of a new lineup of Steeler, you know, as far as Dwayne Miller and Mitch Perry. So we'll save that for maybe the next episode.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Sounds good.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All righty. All right. Bye-bye.